Hi everyone. Today I want to discuss about the big issue of the healthcare. Is this about antibiotic resistance issues, which I prepare the content for about 10 minutes. So please keep listening. So people now are dying of infections again because the phenomenon called antibiotic resistance. Briefly, it works like this. Bacteria compete against each other for resources, for food, by manufacturing lethal compounds that they direct against each other. Other bacteria, to protect themselves, evolved the defense against that chemical attack. When we first made antibiotics, we took those compounds into the lab and made our own version of them, and bacteria responds to our attack the way they always had. Here's what it happens. Penicillin was distributed in 1943 and widespread penicillin resistance arrived by 1945. Vancomycin arrived in 1972, vancomycin resistance in 1988, imipenem in 1985 and resistance to it in 1998, daptomycin, one of the most recent drugs, in 2003, and resistance to just a year later in 2004. For 70 years, we play a game of leapfrog, our drugs, and their resistance, and then another drugs, and then resistance again. And now the game is ending. Bacteria developed resistance so quickly that pharmaceutical company decided making antibiotic is not their best interest. So there are infections moving across the world for which out of the more than 100 antibiotics available on the market, two drugs might work with side effects, or one drug, or none. This is what it looked like. In 2000, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, identified a single case in the hospital in North Carolina of infection resistant to all but two drugs. Today, that infection, known as KPC, has spread to every state but three, and to South America, to Europe, and the Middle East. In 2008, doctor in Sweden diagnosed man from India with a different infection resistant to all but one drug at that time. The gene that created the resistance, known as NDM, has now spread from India to China, Asia, Africa, Europe, and Canada, and United States. It would be natural to hope that these infections are extraordinary cases, but in fact, in the United States and Europe, 50,000 people a year die of infection, which no drug can help. A project chartered by the British government, known as the Review of Antimicrobial Resistance, estimates the worldwide toll right now is 700,000 deaths a year. That is a lot of death. And yet, the chance is good that you don't feel at risk, that you imagine these people were hospital patients in the intensive care unit or nursing home resident near the end of their life. People whose infection are remote from us, in situation that we can't identify with. What do you didn't think about? None of us do. Is the antibiotic support almost of mortal life? If we lost antibiotics, here's what else we lose. First, any protection for people with weak immune system, cancer patients, AIDS patients, transplant recipients, premature babies. Next, any treatment that install foreign object in the bodies, stents for stroke, pumps for diabetes, dialysis, joint replacement. How many athletic baby boomers need new hips and knees? A recent study estimated that without antibiotics, 1 out of every 6 would die. Next, we probably lose surgery. Many operations are preceded by prophylactic dose of antibiotics. Without that protection, we lose the ability to open the hidden space of the body. So, no heart operation, no prostate biopsy, no cesarean section. We have to learn to fear infection that now seem minor. Strep throat used to cause heart failure. Skin infection led to amputations. Giving birth killed in the cleanest hospitals almost one woman out of every 100. Pneumonia took 3 children out of every 10. More than anything else, we lose the confidence way we live our everyday life. If you knew that any injury can kill you, would you ride a motorcycle, bomb down the ski slope, climb a ladder to hang your light in your wall, let your kid play in your playground? After all, the first person to receive penicillin, a British policeman named Albert Alexander, who was so ravaged by infection by his scalp, whose pus and doctor has to take out an eye, was infected by doing something very simple. He walked into his garden and scratched his face on a thorn. That British project I mentioned, which estimates the worldwide toll right now is 700,000 deaths a year, also predict that if we can get this under control by 2050, not long, the worldwide toll will be 10 million deaths a year. How did we get to this point where what we have to look forward is those terrifying numbers? The difficult answer is we did it to ourselves. Resistance is the inevitable biological process that we bear the responsibility for accelerating it. We did this by squandering antibiotics with a heedlessness that now seems shocking. Penicillin was sold over the counter until the 1950s. Even in our country, it is still are. In the United States, 50% of the antibiotics given in the hospital are unnecessary. 45% of the prescriptions written in the doctor's office are for conditions that antibiotics cannot help. And that's just in healthcare. On much of the planet, most meat animals get antibiotics every day of their life, not to kill illnesses, but to fat them up and to protect them against the factory farm condition that they are raising. In United States, possibly 80% of the antibiotics sold every year go to farm animal, not to human, creating resistant bacteria that move off the farm in water, in dust, in the meat that animal become. Agriculture depend on antibiotics too, particularly in Asia, and fruit growing relies on antibiotics to protect apples, pears, citrus against disease. And because bacteria can pass their DNA to each other, like a traveler handing off the suitcase in the airport, once we have encouraged that resistance to existence, there is knowing where it will spread. This was predictable. In fact, it was predicted by Alexander Fleming, the man who discovered penicillin. He was given the Nobel Prize in 1945 in recognition. And in an interview shortly after, this is what he said: "The thoughtless person playing with penicillin treatment is morally responsible for the death of a man who succumbed to infection with a penicillin-resistant organism." He added, "I hope this evil can be averted." Can we avert it? There are companies working on novel antibiotics, things the superbugs have never seen before. We need those new drugs badly, and we need the incentives, discovery grants, extended patents, prices to lure other companies into making antibiotics again. But that probably won't be enough. Here's why. Evolution always wins. Bacteria birth a new generation every 20 minutes. It takes pharmaceutical chemistry 10 years to derive a new drug. Every time we use antibiotics, we give the bacteria billions of chances to crack the codes of the defenses we have constructed. There has never yet been a drug they could not defeat. This is asymmetric warfare. But we can change the outcome. We could build the system to harvest the data to tell us automatically and specifically how antibiotics are being used. We could build the gatekeeping into drug order system so that every prescription get a second look. We could require agriculture to keep up antibiotic use. We could build the surveillance system to tell us where resistance is emerging next. Those are the tech solutions. They probably aren't enough either, unless we help. Antibiotic resistance is a habit. We all know how hard it is to change a habit. But as a society, we've done that in the past. People used to toss litter into the street, used to not to wear seatbelt, used to smoke inside the public building. We don't do those things anymore, right? We don't trash the environment or cause devastating accidents or expose others to of the possibility of cancer because we decide those things were expensive, destructive, not in our best interest. We change social norms. We could change social norms around antibiotic use too. I know that this scale of antibiotic resistance seems overwhelming. But if you ever bought a fluorescent light bulb because you're concerned about the climate change, or read the label of a box of cracker because you think about the deforestation from palm oil, you already know what it feels like to take a tiny step to address the overwhelming problem. We could take those kind of steps for antibiotic use too. We could forego giving an antibiotics if we are not sure it's the right one. We could stop insisting on a prescription for our kids' ear infection before we sure what caused it. We could ask every restaurant, every supermarket where the meat come from. We could promise each other never again to buy chicken or shrimp or fruit raised with routine antibiotic use. And if we did those things, we could slow down the arrival of the post-antibiotic world. But we have to do it soon. Penicillin began antibiotic era in 1943. In just 70 years, we walked ourselves up to the edge of disasters. We won't get 70 years to find our way back out again. Thank you very much.